He stood there in court smirking, calling me an unfit mother in front of everyone. My ex-husband thought he'd already won. But he had no idea what was inside that file the judge was about to open. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My hands were trembling as I sat there, trying not to cry. Every word he threw at me cut deep, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions take over. The courtroom was quiet except for his voice, and I could feel the eyes of strangers judging me. He painted a picture of me that wasn't true. He said I was reckless, careless, and unable to care for my own child. He made it sound as if I was some stranger who had abandoned all responsibility. But inside, I kept reminding myself, just wait, the truth is about to come out. I glanced at the judge, who kept writing notes, her face unreadable. I could tell she was listening carefully, but it was hard not to fear that maybe his words were leaving an impression. He was confident. Leaning back in his chair like this was just a performance he had rehearsed. He thought he had control of the story. I kept my eyes down, holding back every urge to defend myself in that moment. It wasn't my turn yet. My lawyer gave me a small nod as if to say, stay calm. That nod was the only thing keeping me steady. I could feel my heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned out my ex-husband's voice. He smiled as he spoke, twisting things around, making sure every detail worked against me. The way he lied so easily made me sick, but I refused to look at him. I didn't want him to see my tears or my fear. For months, he had been preparing for this day, building up his case with lies and exaggerations. He wanted to make me look like a failure in front of everyone, not because he truly cared about our daughter, but because he wanted to hurt me. That was his goal, humiliation. He wanted to strip me of dignity and walk out with his head held high. As I listened, my grip tightened on the edge of the table. I thought about everything I had endured, the late nights, the sacrifices, the constant effort to keep my child safe and happy. None of that mattered to him, not here. To him, this was a game, and I was just someone he wanted to crush. The silence in the room after he finished was heavy. For a moment, no one moved. He leaned back, certain he had done enough to win. He didn't know what was coming next. He didn't know that the file sitting on the judge's desk held everything he had tried to bury. And I sat there waiting, knowing that soon, the truth would finally speak louder than his lies. Emily Parker met Ryan when she was in her mid-20s. At the time, she believed she had found the perfect partner. Ryan was the kind of man who knew what to say, how to make someone feel special, and he carried himself with confidence. Their early days were filled with long conversations, laughter, and dreams about the future. It didn't take long before they married, and for a while, Emily truly thought her life was heading exactly where it should. The first years of marriage were steady and warm. Ryan worked hard, and Emily felt proud of him. He often spoke about building a life together, owning a home, and creating a stable environment for a family. They saved money, supported each other, and seemed to share the same vision. Emily would cook dinner, and Ryan would tell her about his day. He made her feel safe, and that safety meant everything to her back then. When their daughter Lily was born, Emily's heart felt full in a way she had never known before. Holding Lily in her arms gave her strength and joy. She thought this moment would bring her and Ryan even closer. At first, he seemed happy too, showing off their baby to friends, talking about how lucky they were. Emily believed they were stepping into a new chapter that would make their bond even stronger. But the change came slowly. Ryan started staying out later than usual. At first, he said it was because of work, late meetings, unexpected deadlines. Emily wanted to believe him, so she didn't question it. She was exhausted from caring for a newborn and didn't have the energy to argue. Still, she noticed the way his smile began to fade when he looked at her. He didn't ask about her day anymore, didn't offer to help with Lily's sleepless nights. Soon, the excuses piled up. Business trips that didn't make sense. Weekends where he claimed he had things to take care of. Emily sat alone in their living room many nights, feeding Lily, listening to the silence. Ryan stopped sharing his thoughts with her, and even when he was home, it felt like he was far away. His phone was always in his hand, his tone sharper than before, and small disagreements turned into cold silences that lasted for days. Emily tried to bring him back, planning little family moments, cooking his favorite meals, asking him to join her for walks with Lily. But Ryan brushed her off, saying he was tired or busy. Slowly, his charm vanished, replaced by a kind of distance that felt intentional. He didn't treat her like a partner anymore. Instead, he treated her like someone standing in the way of what he wanted. For Emily, the hardest part wasn't the silence or the late nights. It was the loss of the man she thought he was. She could see the life they had built beginning to slip away, and though she held on to hope, she knew something had shifted that she couldn't ignore. Emily's doubts about Ryan grew stronger when his late nights became more frequent. There were small signs at first: receipts in his car that didn't match his story, the faint smell of perfume on his shirt, text notifications he quickly hid when she walked into the room. For weeks, she tried to push those thoughts away, convincing herself she was imagining things. But deep inside, she knew something wasn't right. The truth came to her in the worst possible way. One afternoon, Emily decided to surprise Ryan by bringing lunch to his office. She thought maybe a small gesture might ease the distance between them. When she arrived, she didn't find him at his desk. Instead, she saw him in the parking lot, laughing and leaning too close to a woman she had never met before. The way they looked at each other left no doubt. That woman was Jessica, his coworker. Emily stood frozen, the lunch bag in her hands shaking. She wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers right there, but instead she walked away quietly, her heart breaking with every step. Later that night, when Ryan finally came home, she confronted him. She asked him directly about Jessica, hoping for honesty. Instead, Ryan turned cold. He didn't deny it, but he twisted the blame back onto her. He told her she hadn't been enough, that she wasn't the wife he needed anymore. He said she spent too much time with Lily and not enough with him, as if caring for their child was something to be ashamed of. His words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Emily realized in that moment that the man she had trusted for years no longer respected her, not as a partner, not even as a person. The fight that night was long and bitter. Emily cried, begged, and shouted, while Ryan stayed calm, almost smug, as if her pain didn't matter. He admitted he had feelings for Jessica, and that being with her made him feel alive again. To him, Emily had become a burden. Those words would echo in her mind for days, leaving scars she couldn't erase. The days that followed were filled with silence and anger. Ryan didn't try to fix things. Instead, he grew more distant, coming home later and eventually not at all. Emily realized their marriage was over. The man she had built a life with had chosen someone else and blamed her for his choices. Filing for divorce was the hardest step Emily had ever taken. She didn't want to break apart her family, but Ryan had already done that when he walked away from her. What hurt most was that he didn't seem to care about Lily either. He used their daughter as another weapon in arguments, saying Emily wasn't capable of raising her alone. That betrayal wasn't just between husband and wife. It cut through the bond of their entire family. That was the beginning of a battle Emily never imagined she'd have to fight. The divorce papers were signed, but the real war was just beginning. When the divorce process moved forward, Emily thought the worst part was behind her. She believed that once papers were signed, she could focus on rebuilding her life with Lily. But Ryan had other plans. Instead of moving on, he decided to go after the one thing Emily loved most, her daughter. Ryan's demand for full custody shocked her. He had never shown real interest in the day-to-day care of Lily. He missed doctor's appointments, school meetings, and bedtime routines. Yet in the courtroom, he acted like the most dedicated father in the world. Emily knew why. It wasn't about love for Lily. It was about control, about hurting her in the deepest way possible. From the very first hearing, Ryan's lawyer came prepared with a strategy that felt cruel. They painted Emily as unstable, using her emotions as evidence. Every tear she shed was twisted into proof that she was too fragile to raise a child. They brought up small mistakes and stretched them into lies, trying to create the image of a careless mother. Emily sat in silence, clutching her hands together under the table. Each word spoken about her felt like a knife. She wanted to defend herself, to tell the judge how she had stayed up all night caring for Lily, how she managed every appointment, every need, every sacrifice. But she knew it wasn't her turn to speak. The courtroom rules forced her to stay quiet while others tore apart her character. Ryan, sitting across the room, looked calm and collected. He nodded as his lawyer spoke, giving the impression of a father who was simply trying to do what was best. His performance was convincing, and Emily could see the effect it had on the people watching. It felt like the truth of her life was being erased and replaced with his version of the story. What made it worse was how casual Ryan was about it all. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look worried. To him, this was just another move in a game he thought he was winning. Emily could see the smirk on his face when the lawyer emphasized her instability. That look told her everything. He wasn't fighting for Lily, he was fighting to see her break. When the session ended for the day, Emily walked out of the courthouse with her head down. The whispers from strangers in the hallway made her feel smaller than she had ever felt. It wasn't just about custody anymore, it was about dignity. Ryan wanted to destroy hers in front of everyone. That night, as Emily tucked Lily into bed, she forced a smile and kissed her daughter's forehead. She didn't let Lily see the fear she carried. But deep inside, she knew the fight was only beginning, and Ryan was willing to do anything to win. She had no choice but to hold her ground, no matter how painful the battle would be. The next hearing was worse than Emily had prepared herself for. She sat at the table, her lawyer by her side, while Ryan took the stand. He spoke with confidence, his voice steady, as if he had rehearsed every line. From the moment he opened his mouth, Emily knew he was going to do everything he could to destroy her in front of the judge. Ryan claimed Emily couldn't hold down a job, saying she jumped from one thing to another without stability. He twisted the truth, leaving out the fact that she had chosen flexible work to spend more time caring for Lily. To him, it was easier to make her look irresponsible. Each word was chosen to cut her down, and he delivered them with a tone that carried both arrogance and cruelty. When he called her too emotional, Emily felt her stomach turn. He said she cried too easily, that she let her feelings control her, and that it made her unfit to make sound decisions for their daughter. He painted her love and vulnerability as weaknesses. The worst part was that he never faltered, never showed a hint of shame while tearing her apart. Then came the blow that nearly broke her. He argued that Lily would be better off living with him and Jessica. Hearing another woman's name, spoken as if she had some rightful place in her child's life, cut Emily deeply. Ryan described Jessica as responsible and stable, claiming she would provide the kind of home Emily never could. Emily's hands tightened into fists in her lap, but she kept her head down, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. The judge listened silently, occasionally writing notes, while Ryan kept piling on accusations. He mentioned how Emily was often tired, how she sometimes looked overwhelmed, how she struggled financially after the separation. He turned every sacrifice she had made as a mother into a weakness to be used against her. It felt like the walls were closing in, and Emily could barely breathe. From across the room, Ryan smirked as he spoke. His expression wasn't one of a concerned father fighting for his child. It was the grin of a man who thought he had already won. He wanted to humiliate her, to strip her of any confidence, to make her believe she had no chance. That smirk reminded Emily of every night he had dismissed her, every lie he had told, every moment he made her feel small. Emily sat quietly, her lawyer occasionally placing a steadying hand on her arm, reminding her to stay composed. But inside, she was shaking. The humiliation was heavy, pressing down on her, but she refused to collapse under it. She knew the truth was still on her side. When Ryan finally stepped down, Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The damage was done, but deep down, she held on to one thought: his lies wouldn't protect him forever. The truth was waiting, and soon it would come to light. The courtroom felt heavy after Ryan's performance. Emily sat frozen, her chest tight, as if all the lies he had thrown at her were hanging in the air like a dark cloud. For a moment, she worried the judge might be swayed. The notes the judge scribbled down made her heart sink. She feared that all of Ryan's false claims would outweigh the truth of who she really was. But then her lawyer stood. Without rushing, he carried a thick file to the judge's bench and placed it carefully in front of her. Emily held her breath, watching. She had waited for this moment, but the weight of it still pressed on her shoulders. The judge adjusted her glasses and opened the file. The sound of pages turning echoed through the room. Everyone grew quiet. Ryan leaned back in his chair, still confident, but Emily saw the flicker of unease in his eyes when he noticed how thick the file was. He hadn't expected anything like it. Inside were documents that told the story Ryan had worked so hard to bury. There were financial records showing money he had gambled away, large debts he had tried to hide, and transactions that revealed how irresponsible he had been. The numbers painted a clear picture of a man who was reckless, not stable. Next came police reports. Emily remembered how hard it had been to collect them, how much courage it took to revisit those nights when neighbors had called in noise complaints after Ryan's drunken outbursts. The reports described his temper, the shouting, and the threats that had spilled out of their home. They were proof that Emily hadn't been exaggerating when she described his behavior. The hospital documents cut even deeper. They showed the times Emily had taken Lily for checkups alone, the times Ryan had failed to show up despite promises. There were also medical notes about Emily herself, records of stress and exhaustion caused by his neglect. Every page told the truth in black and white, and there was no way for him to twist it now. The judge's face grew more serious with each page she read. She no longer looked at Emily like she was fragile. Instead, she looked at Ryan with a kind of sharpness that made the entire room still. Emily sat straighter, her breath finally easing a little. Ryan's smirk had vanished. He leaned forward now, trying to glance at the papers, whispering to his lawyer, who looked just as unsettled. For the first time in months, Emily saw fear in his expression. The lies he had so confidently told were unraveling, and he knew it. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. The file spoke for her. Everything she had endured, every sacrifice she had made, every truth Ryan tried to bury. It was all laid out clearly for the judge to see. In that moment, Emily realized this was the turning point. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she had a chance to win. The judge took her time going through the file, page by page. The courtroom was so quiet that Emily could hear her own heartbeat. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, no longer looking so confident. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering quickly, but Ryan didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the stack of papers that threatened to tear apart the story he had built. The first set of documents revealed Ryan's history of DUIs. There were several arrests listed, each one connected to reckless behavior behind the wheel. The judge read them carefully, her eyes narrowing. It was no longer Emily's word against his. The proof was right there, stamped and signed by the authorities. Ryan had tried to hide those nights, but now they were out in the open for everyone to see. Then came the evidence of his gambling. Bank statements showed large withdrawals at casinos, late-night transactions, and debts that had been piling up for years. Emily remembered the stress she had carried during those times, wondering where the money was going and how to keep the bills paid. Now, at last, the truth was being laid bare. He wasn't the stable provider he pretended to be. He was reckless with money and left his family to deal with the fallout. The judge flipped to another section, and this time, the silence in the room grew heavier. Police reports showed calls from neighbors about loud arguments and domestic disturbances. Descriptions of shouting, objects being thrown, and drunken nights were written in detail. Emily felt a knot in her stomach as those memories came flooding back, but she kept her head high. She didn't need to relive those moments aloud. The papers spoke clearly enough. Finally, the most important section appeared: medical records. These showed every doctor's appointment for Lily since she was born. Emily's name was signed over and over again, the proof that she had been there for every checkup, every vaccination, every emergency. And Ryan's name? Missing from almost all of them. The records made it clear who had been consistent and who had not. The judge looked up from the file and turned her gaze directly toward Ryan. Her expression was no longer neutral. There was disappointment, even anger, in her eyes. She asked Ryan's lawyer why none of this had been disclosed before. The lawyer stammered, searching for excuses, but there was no way to explain away years of records and official documents. Emily sat still, her hands folded in her lap. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she didn't smile or gloat. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth finally being recognized. For so long, Ryan had tried to twist reality, to make her look small and incapable. Now, in front of the judge, he had no ground left to stand on. Ryan leaned back in his chair, his face pale. The smirk he once wore was gone completely. For the first time, he looked like a man cornered by his own lies. The judge placed the file down slowly, her hand resting on top of it as she looked across the courtroom. The shift in her expression was clear. Moments earlier, she had been calm and neutral, listening to both sides. Now, there was no hiding the sharp edge in her eyes. She turned toward Ryan, studying him as if she was finally seeing the man behind all the smooth words and fake confidence. Her voice was steady but carried weight. She asked Ryan directly how he could stand in court and accuse Emily of being an unfit mother when his own record was filled with reckless behavior. She pointed to the DUIs, the gambling debts, and the police reports, questioning whether he truly believed a man with that kind of history could claim to provide a more stable home. The room went silent. Ryan shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. His lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand to silence him. It was clear she wasn't interested in excuses. She had heard enough. Turning back to Emily, The judge's tone softened slightly. She acknowledged the medical records, showing Emily's commitment to Lily's care. She noted how every appointment, every responsibility had fallen on her shoulders, while Ryan had been absent. The contrast between the two parents was undeniable. The judge's words cut through the courtroom like a knife. She said it was not only unfair but insulting for Ryan to call Emily unfit when she had been the one carrying the weight of parenthood alone. Emily felt her chest tighten with emotion, fighting back tears as she listened. For so long, she had been silenced and doubted, but in that moment, someone with authority saw the truth. Ryan's face turned red, his earlier smirk completely gone. He glanced at Jessica, who sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, her eyes down. For once, Ryan had no clever comeback, no confident grin. His lies had been laid bare, and even he seemed to realize the walls were closing in around him. The judge leaned forward, her voice firm, as she reminded Ryan that custody battles were meant to determine the best environment for a child, not to be used as weapons of revenge between parents. She made it clear that what she had seen in the file showed a pattern of recklessness and neglect on his part, while Emily had shown consistency and care. The silence in the room was heavy, but this time, Emily didn't feel small under it. She felt seen. She felt like her truth had finally broken through all the noise and lies Ryan had created. As the judge finished speaking, the weight in Emily's chest lifted just a little. For the first time in a long while, she believed justice was leaning her way. And from the look on Ryan's face, he knew it too. The final decision came after hours of testimony and documents being reviewed. Emily sat at the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, waiting for the words that would decide her and Lily's future. The courtroom was still, every eye fixed on the judge. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she could hardly hear her own breath. When the judge began to speak, her tone was firm and decisive. She said it was clear who had been the steady and reliable parent. She spoke about Emily's consistency, her dedication to Lily's health and education, and her ability to provide a safe and nurturing home. Then she turned her focus to Ryan, pointing out his reckless history, his irresponsible choices, and the disturbing pattern of behavior shown in the file. The ruling came with no hesitation. Emily would have full custody of Lily. Ryan would only be allowed supervised visitation until he could prove that he was capable of being a responsible parent. The words seemed to echo in the room, heavy and final. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. For a moment, she didn't even move. It was as if her body needed time to understand that the nightmare she had been living was finally ending. Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered, "You did it." The words washed over her like a wave of relief. Across the room, Ryan's face told a different story. The smug grin he had carried throughout the hearings was gone. In its place was a mixture of shock and barely contained anger. His jaw tightened, his eyes burning with resentment as if he couldn't believe he had lost. He whispered furiously to his lawyer, but the decision had already been made. Nothing he said now could change it. Emily didn't look at him for long. She kept her focus on Lily, who was waiting outside with a family friend. The thought of going to her daughter with good news made Emily's heart ache with gratitude. She had fought through months of lies, humiliation, and fear, and now the truth had carried her through. As the judge wrapped up the session, Emily finally allowed herself to exhale. The weight she had been carrying for so long lifted, replaced with a quiet strength. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Raising Lily on her own would come with challenges, and Ryan's anger would not disappear overnight. But none of that mattered compared to the fact that her daughter was safe with her, where she belonged. Walking out of the courtroom, Emily felt the sun on her face for the first time in what seemed like forever. She no longer felt small or powerless. She felt vindicated. She had stood her ground, told her truth, and refused to be broken by his lies. And now, she had won the one thing that mattered most, her daughter's future. Emily stepped out of the courthouse into the fresh air, her daughter's small hand held tightly in hers. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe without fear pressing on her chest. The heavy weight of the battle was behind her, and in its place came a calm she hadn't known in a long time. She looked down at Lily, who smiled up at her with innocent eyes, unaware of the storm her mother had just survived. That smile was all the proof Emily needed that everything had been worth it. As they walked toward the car, Emily realized Ryan had failed at the very thing he wanted most, to break her. He had thrown lies, insults, and humiliation at her, hoping she would collapse under the pressure. But in the end, he had destroyed himself. His gambling, his reckless choices, his violence, All the things he thought would stay hidden were the very things that took away his power. Emily didn't need to shout or seek revenge. Her victory was quiet, but stronger than anything Ryan could imagine. Her revenge was in living a life he could never touch, filled with stability, love, and the bond between her and Lily. She had fought for her daughter and won, and now she could move forward knowing Ryan's control over her was gone. The following days felt different. For the first time, Emily woke up without dread. She prepared Lily's breakfast, walked her to school, and returned home to a space that finally felt safe. Every ordinary task carried a new kind of freedom. She no longer had to prove herself to Ryan or defend her worth to anyone. The court had seen the truth, and that truth had set her free. Ryan's supervised visits began, but Emily noticed the difference right away. The man who once strutted with arrogance now carried frustration and shame. He had no power left to intimidate her. The court monitors made sure Lily was safe, and Emily never had to fear what might happen when her daughter was with him. Watching him face the consequences of his own choices gave Emily a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible. She knew there would still be hard days ahead. Raising Lily alone would come with challenges, but Emily carried a strength now that no one could take away. The years of pain had taught her resilience, and the courtroom victory had reminded her of her worth. She had stood up against lies and cruelty, and she had protected the most important person in her life. As she sat with Lily one evening, reading a bedtime story, Emily realized the lesson she wanted her daughter to grow up with. Strength isn't about fighting loudly or seeking revenge with anger. It's about standing firm, holding on to truth, and building a better life no matter who tries to tear it down. Ryan had lost everything he tried to take from her, but Emily had gained something far greater: peace, freedom, and a future filled with hope.